Hello friends and welcome to another session of English literature. So today's topic of discussion is war poetry. So in this session I'm going to discuss the salient features of war poetry, and this question also comes like what do you understand by war poetry, and discuss Wilfred Owen and Siegfried Session as war poets. So let's start the session. So the title war poetry is bestowed on the works of the poets, as J. Cudden observes in his Dictionary of Literary Terms and Literary Theories, that who soldiered in various capacities during the First World War and who recorded very memorably their feelings about their experience. Friends, here I break the line into two parts, but you can also write it in the way that the title war poetry is bestowed on the works of the poets who soldiered in various capacities during the First World War and who recorded very memorably their feelings about their experience. So, of the social reality of the modern time, war is certainly an important, unfortunate, and yet inevitable affair. It is a catalyzing agent hastening on inviolable process of division. The passion aroused by war has different expression in the poems written during the First World War. They indicate clash of ideas and effort for understanding and a keenness for the realization of a stability in social order, facing the turmoil of belligerency. Okay, so belligerency is the term which is used to denote the situation of war. Okay. J. A. Cudden also remarked that some 70 British poets wrote about war and that more than 50 of them were actively engaged in it. So prominent among them are Rupert Brooke, Julian Greenfield, Wilfred Owen, Siegfried Session, Charles Sorley, Isaac Rosenberg, Edward Shankis, Edward Thomas, and so on. So there are two anthologies containing the poetry of the First World War. So you have to remember one thing, that the war poetry basically based on the effects of the First World War. Okay, so basically there are two anthologies containing the poetry of the First World War, and they are Up the Line to Death and Men Who March Away. So commenting on the war poetry, Albert observes that broadly two phases may be distinguished. The first was one of patriotic fervor, a revival of the romantic conception of knight at arms, and the second phase was marked by a frankly realistic picture of the suffering, brutality, squalor, and futility of the struggle. So thus the poets of the First World War was divided themselves into two groups. Number one is romantic war poets and number two is realistic war poets. So thus the poets of the First World War were divided themselves into two groups. Number one is romantic war poets and number two is realistic war poets. So now we have to know about the romantic war poets and why they are called romantic war poets, okay? So the romantic war poets include the names of Rupert Brooke, Ehrman, Greenfield and Flicker. So why are they called romantic war poets? So they rejoice the activity of self-sacrifice of human freedom. They hold a romantic or sentimental views of war and look upon as a fine opportunity to display patriotism. So friends, as you can see that the romantic war poets in their poetry display the spirit of patriotism, romantic or sentimental views, and that's why they are called romantic war poets, okay? So now let's read about Rupert Brooke as a romantic war poet. So among the war poets, the first name to be recognized is Rupert Brooke. He was a soldier poet, but he died so early in the green business of war that he had a very little knowledge with it. Naturally, his war poems are romantically inspired with full of patriotic sentiments. He enthusiastically welcomed all to action with joy, as he said that, "Now, God be thanked who has made us with this hour, and caught our youth and wakened us from sleeping." So the feature of a war poet in Rupert Brooke is essentially patriotic, rather excessively nationalistic. His poetry echoes his complacent view of war as a noble ordeal for the preservation of English honor and glory for the cause of justice and peace. So these views of Rupert Brooke is distinctly reflected in his celebrated sonnet, which is The Soldier. So after Rupert Brooke, we have another romantic war poet who is Julian Greenfield. So sometimes the romantic war poets like Julian Greenfield began as a meditative poet and maintained the spirit of tranquility and confidence not found in other war poets. Okay, so in the midst of fire, he can withdraw into himself and find solace in the object of nature. His famous poem Into Battle mirrors this serene attitude in which even death does not appear as horror. So now we have the realistic war poets. So the realistic war poets include the names of Siegfried Session, Wilfred Owen. They expose the intention of shattering the illusion of the splendors of war. Unlike the romantic war poets, the major aim of the realistic war poets is to denote or to expose the real face of the war or the evil part, the horror of the war. Okay. So we have Siegfried Session as a realistic war poet. So Siegfried Session was one of the first great soldier poets who revealed the horror of and ugliness of war. He presented in his verse ghostly and terrible realities of the trenches. The poems in the counter-attack brings out the horrors of war as the poet means Siegfried Session puts in the place war rotten with dead, green, clumsy legs and trunks face downward in the suckling mud. He admitted or pleaded to the people to stop war, but failing to convince the warlords the futility of war. He felt indignant at them and writes about his fellow soldiers. Tonight he is in the pink, but soon he will die. And still the war goes on. He don't know why. So these lines are quite forceful. So up next we have Wilfred Owen. So of the realistic war poets, Wilfred Owen is the most formidable one. His poems bear the marks of realism and humanism. The subject matter of his poetry, as he himself records in the unfinished preface to his collected poems, is war and the pity of war. As he says that, my subject is war and the pity of war. The poetry is in the pity. This tone means the war and the pity of war which he wanted to show the people. So this tone is again comes into foreground in The Strange Meeting, which is another most important war poem. So where he writes that, I mean the truth untold, the pity of war, the pity war distilled. So this was all about Wilfred Owen. Now we have reached to our conclusion, which is, to conclude, it can be said that the hard reality of the dreadful war is found to have a significant literary impact to rouse the poetic passion in diverse ways. The soldier poets who wrote under this impact are many, but some of them, despite their contrary viewpoints to war, are endearing names in the English poetry of the 20th century. Besides this, war poetry also signifies a distinct trend in the English poetry to satisfy Matthew Arnold's view of the high seriousness of poetry as a part of the value of poetry as a criticism of life. So here, the last quotation means high seriousness of poetry as the part of the value of poetry as a criticism of life. It is taken from Matthew Arnold's quotation, okay? He sees poetry as a criticism of life, okay? So in the poems, the realistic war poets, they actually criticizes and mocks the dreadful event of war or the horrors of war or battle, okay? So here in the third line, it goes like, some of them, despite their contrary viewpoints to war, are endearing names in the English poetry of the 20th century. So here, contrary viewpoints means those who wrote war poetry from the sentimental or romantic point of view. So here the point is, though the romantic war poets didn't mention any terrifying, horrifying events of war, they only see it from a romantic or sentimental perspective. But they are also entitled as the greatest war poets. So this is what I tried to mention in these lines. If you don't want to put these lines into your answer, then please keep it. Write in simple sentence that the romantic war poets didn't criticize war, but they are also the endearing names in the English poetry of the 20th century. On the contrary, the realistic war poets criticizes as well as shows the horrifying events of war. That's why their poetry satisfies Matthew Arnold's view that poetry is a criticism of life. So you can write like this, okay? So that's it, friends. Thank you so much for watching this video, and if you like this video, then please like this video, share this video, comment on this video, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And if you want to know about any topic of English literature, then please let me know so that I can make a video of it. So bye bye for now. See you in the next session for sure.